Today's guest, Jeremy Slate, has tried it all: teaching, network marketing, in home personal training, selling life insurance, buying products from China and reselling them on Amazon. And instead, he became really good at creating debt and not paying bills. Then he had an idea to start a podcast. Okay, so the first one failed. The second one, 10,000 listeners in its first 30 days. Today, we're going to be talking to Jeremy about how he grew his audience, both on the podcast and in social media, which he's also got some impressive numbers there too. Welcome to the show, Jeremy.
Hey Denise, thank you so much for having me. I was laughing with that intro because I feel like you actually those are my direct quotes of things I've said at some point in time. Because I always say I have a very dry sense of humor. Like I feel like I should be British, and I often say things like I was really good at creating debt. So thank you for that.
You're quite welcome. Now, right before the show started, we talked a little bit about, hey, I was jiggling time so I could take the dog out so she isn't whining behind me because she's got to go to the bathroom. And you shared some information about your pets. So
Yeah.
share that with our audience because I found it a little bit interesting.
So I have a toy poodle. She's 14. And her name is Coco Chanel, by the way. She's very fashionable. We also have a border collie corgi, which is the most energetic dog you ever heard. Before I go to bed every night, the poodle hides because she doesn't want to be forced to go to the bathroom before she goes to bed because she's very comfortable. We also have, and we live on like 4 acres here with like a river and stuff like that going through my yard. We have 3 dozen chickens. I have 3 roosters. One of my roosters is a silky chicken, which is kind of like owning a Persian cat if it's a chicken. He's not super useful, but he's kind of cute. And we also have 3 ducks and a pig. So we're very busy over here.
It sounds like you are. And your family, you have a couple of children as well.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I have two girls. It's I mentioned all the chickens and everything else. I am like so overwhelmed with like ladies in my house. I am just like the duck and the pig and I like we just hang out and kind of talk to each other about like what it's like to be a guy, and that's about it.
Wait, you don't include the roosters?
They're not that useful. They're I was like, guys, shut up. We're talking here.
Oh my gosh. So that's really funny. Okay, so Jeremy, you've done some really impressive things. You have your own company called Command Your Brand, and you are the host of a podcast called the Create Your Own Life Show, correct?
Yes.
So tell me
Yeah,
about how you started the first of all the podcast. Well, which came first, the podcast or the company?
the podcast.
Okay, so tell me. So we'll
It's
start there.
it's funny because like how I recommend people use a podcast isn't how I use the podcast. But 2014 is very different than 2022, right? Like it's changed a
Absolutely.
lot. And so for me, you mentioned all the different businesses I failed at. I have a master's in ancient history and I taught high school for a couple of years, and I burnt out super quickly. And my mom had a stroke in 2012,
Mm.
and it made me look at a lot of what I was doing and realizing like, do I want to do this? So I tried all those different things. It's funny. I was kind of reminiscing with my wife about this the other day. In-home personal training is probably the worst business model ever. So I'm going to pay high gas prices, drive to your house, try and get you to work out, not worry about your diet, and then you're going to get mad at me when you don't lose weight. So I've tried a lot of different businesses over the years that didn't really work out for me. And I've been a podcast super fan since literally like 2008. I had
Mhm.
a college professor that introduced me to a podcast called the No Agenda Show. It's hosted by Adam Curry, who's actually the podfather. He's the guy that invented podcasting, and John Dvorak. And they actually just play clips from the news and they kind of laugh about it a little bit, play these radio jingles where it's kind of funny. And you're like, wow, the world seems a whole lot less threatening. So I've been a podcast super fan for a long time. And after I failed at a lot of different things, I'd always said, well, maybe I'll start a podcast one day. So in 2014, I started a podcast called Rock Your Life. It was absolutely terrible. I had an iBook G4. This is before MacBooks back in the day.
Mm.
And the microphone was the microphone on my computer, so it kind of sounded like I was like one of those teachers on Charlie Brown. So it just wasn't good. Like it was like super life coachy, which I'm just not. I'm a very blunt, to the point type person. So it wasn't authentic to me. It wasn't very good. And it lasted about 60 days. I think we had maybe 150 downloads. So, and we had 40 episodes, by the way. So like nobody was listening.
Mm.
So I had tried that the first time and it didn't work. And I ended up getting engaged and I got married in 2015. And it made me look at a lot of what I'm doing. I'm like, all right, I failed all these different businesses. I look like a really bad investment right now. My wife must really love me. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to try this podcast thing and see what happens. I was working at a friend's marketing firm at the time to just, pay the bills and everything. And I started this show and we had 10,000 listens in our first month. Not because I had a following, not because I was popular, because I didn't. I had none of those things. I had I think 150 followers on Twitter, and it was like the only social media platform I had when I started. So it came down to, reaching out to a lot of people, right? Like I had built a small email list with all these different businesses that fail with like 700 people on it. So I tried to get all those people to subscribe. I sent out 500 messages on Facebook asking people to subscribe. And I found out the number where it cuts you off of sending the same link is 500. You can't send that link anymore after 500. So I then moved on to texting every person in my phone. I had a decent number of people on my phone that time. I think I had a few hundred people on my phone.
Mhm.
So I was texting that to people on my phone. I was sending LinkedIn messages before I knew there was such a thing since called automation. So I was like 8 hours, copy and paste, change the name, copy and paste, change the name, copy and paste, change the name. Please don't report me as spam. So I did all these different things. And I knew like the number one thing I had to do, and it really still is to this day, is win the subscribe, because the number of subscribers you can gain in a 24-hour period in ratio to your current subscribers is what jumps you on a chart. And at 2015, iTunes New and Noteworthy was still a big deal. It's not really that big a deal now. And actually it was frozen for like 3 years. So I got in New and Noteworthy and I got 8 weeks of free promotion. And that's what actually pushed me to get this following that I didn't, really didn't deserve, right? I didn't have a lot of experience. I didn't have a lot of background, didn't have a following to create it. And that was kind of where things came from. And what happened is after that success, people said, hey, can you help me with this? So we started a company that did done for you podcasts, which means we charge way too little money, $1,500. And we did a month and we did everything, building your website, building your podcast, booking your guests, editing your show. I was like negative in terms of like the profit margin here. We weren't making anything. And one of the things we did for our clients was we actually helped them get another podcast before they launched their own show. So people knew like, hey, there's a show coming. You already listened to podcasts. You should check this one out. And we ended up dropping the part of actually building shows. And we focused just on, really booking great podcasts, helping people tell a better story. And we've been doing that for almost 7 years now.
So it was a combination of beating the pavement, so to speak, even though it was the digital version of that.
Well, I did door-to-door sales for a while too, and that taught me a lot about beating the pavement. Let me tell you.
So it was a combination of that and a little bit of timing and leveraging the platforms. Is that what I understood correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of it was timing too. As I mentioned, like I wasn't good. I was, willing to kind of keep running into the wall until something happened. And there was a little bit of luck in that too. Like New and Noteworthy, it pretty much closed in 2016 and didn't open again until 2018. And it wasn't really valuable anymore after 2018. So there was a lot of timing involved too.
So what do you find being the most valuable ways currently to promote your podcast?
Number one is really, really niching. You can't really go, in 2012, I think is when John Lee Dumas started Entrepreneur on Fire, and you could go super broad then. I don't know how many podcasts there were in 2012, but I do know in 2015, 14 and 15, when I started, they were 240,000. There's like 3.5 million now, depending on what host you look at. I know Spotify likes to claim they're more, and Apple Podcasts likes to claim they're less, but there's like 3 million shows out there, basically. So that's a substantially bigger sea to get lost in. So you have to really niche, because if your audience is everyone, it's no one. So when you really niche, you know exactly how those people think, what they care about, what matters to them, who are their influencers. So if you niche, that's kind of part one. And if you're not going to do that, like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, it might not be a good idea to start. The other point is differentiating. Like, how are you different from other people in your space? And what do you do that's different? How do you discuss things that's different? Like, it's really, really important. And taking a lot of action up front of, getting on other podcasts, and creating content. Like right now, we're actually focusing heavily on YouTube, and YouTube's been doing great things for growing our podcast. So you have to be willing to put in a lot of that motion to get out there and promote. I think often people think it's just on the guests you have on your show to promote you, which, guests should be promoting you, and that's important, but it's not the fuel that's going to grow a podcast like it was 15 years ago, right? Because those people are doing a lot more shows. So the chances that they promote you aren't very high, frankly.
Okay. So niche your podcast, Oh, my brain just completely went blank. Don't you love that when that happens in the
No,
middle of
niche
the
your
podcast?
podcast, differentiate, right? Like you have to have
Differentiate.
it because if you're an
Mhm.
influencer and you have something important to say, you're going to have a different opinion, right? Like, and
Mhm.
and different from the perspective of, I think sometimes people try to like, they kind of try to come in this like angry, disrupting way. And like, that's not the point. Different in the perspective of like, there's a particular reason somebody comes to you for what they're talking about, right? Um, it's kind of the second thing there. The third thing is getting another podcast is a really big deal. And we're focusing on getting our content other ways. As I mentioned, YouTube's a really big deal for us. We're doing a lot of snippets, teasers. We put whole interviews on YouTube in video form, but we actually find the thing that pulls most traffic to our channel is what are called segments. So the segments are like between
Mhm.
4 minute and no longer than 8 minutes is kind of like the what we find to be the right thing, and that actually drives like 95% of the new traffic to our channel.
Interesting, because you and I actually spoke about this ahead of time, saying, "Hey, well, sometimes we use the video and sometimes we don't." So, actually, I'm approaching it the wrong way.
Well, YouTube's the second largest search engine out there, right? And it's
Hmm.
like, and I will tell you, like sometimes we discuss some topics, and I'm like, I don't know if YouTube's gonna like this, so we just put that on like Rumble and some other platforms. But like, it's a really great place for discoverability. So you kind of want to play within their rules and understand it's the second biggest search engine out there after Google, really, which owns YouTube. So there you go.
For sure, for sure. So, do you do any advertising or promotion otherwise, or right now are you pretty much just at organic?
We do some paid stuff on YouTube. We find that YouTube ads have been very, very successful for us, is one thing. We actually do a lot, and it's whenever I say this, people are like, huh? We do a lot of Twitter advertising, believe it or not, because
Hmm.
nobody else does it. So it's really cheap.
Okay.
And you can actually get a pretty good return on promoting like tweets of episodes on Twitter. Usually, if it's like the episode link or an MP3 file, like the videos don't do as well because people have to leave the platform. It's something people can actually like interact with and engage with and listen to on the platform. So I find the MP3s work really well for that. But Twitter ads have been really big for us in terms of promotion too. And when I say like, if we're spending $100 an episode, that's a lot. Like we're usually spending 10, 20, $30 an episode on Twitter, and that's it. And it's getting us a good amount of traffic.
So you do know I'm going to try that right after the show, right?
Well, so here's what you got to do then. You got to go out and when you're going to do this, when you're for your targeting, you want to number one like focus on US, right? Because that's important. Like other countries
Hmm.
are great, but they're not going to help you climb US charts. The second thing you want to do is pick one or two influencers in your space that are authoritative, that if your content got in front of their followers, it would be a big deal for you. Now, here's the other thing that a lot of people don't do. Um, as weird as this is, you want to set up two different ad sets. The first ad set is just at people on iOS devices and use your Apple Podcast link. The other one is just at people on Android and you use your Spotify link. So that way you're getting the most out of those two different ad sets. Because I know people on Apple that listen on Spotify and vice versa, but most Android users are listening on Spotify now. So you're kind of going to get the most bang for your buck on that.
That makes sense, and I would not have thought about that. So,
I'm a tech
ooh,
nerd, so this is where my
ooh,
head goes.
I like that. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about YouTube. We've talked a little bit about Twitter. By the way, you have almost 10,000 followers on Twitter. Is that not correct?
Uh, 10,002 something. We were
Okay.
over 10,003 something, but we lost a few people last week.
Okay. So 10,000 followers, 60,000 on Facebook, 75,000 on Instagram, and LinkedIn 12.5. At least that by the data that I got, which obviously things could have changed slightly
Yeah,
since
I think we're
then.
like 13.4 on LinkedIn now. I think
Wow.
Instagram's that's about right. I think we're at 13.4 on LinkedIn now.
So, I've talked to clients in the past because we do social media at my company.
Hmm.
And, if their objective is strictly growth and very aggressively, I don't work with them.
Hmm.
Growth to me is a vanity metric. Now, growth is good.
Hey, I love that because people always say to me, "Hey, you book podcasts. Can I go on Joe Rogan?" I'm like, "Is this going to affect your business, or you just want to feel good about yourself?" So, thank you for saying that.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is if you're putting out great content and growing, that's a great strategy.
Hmm.
And so talk to me. How did you get this growth, and what type of content were you putting out there?
Well, can I tell you the things that kind of ostensibly look like they work, but actually didn't work in the long run. Can I start with those as well?
Yes, mistakes
Because
and blunders help us learn. So please.
so one of the big things, and it actually led to a lot of our account growth on Instagram, is we did paid shout outs. And here's the thing I found is you grow, but your engagement tanks because those people
Mhm.
actually don't like your content, right? So it's like they're just kind of like, oh, some celebrity told me to go follow you, so here I am. So like we did a lot of those early on, and we got some growth out of that, but it does not help your engagement. So that was one part of it.
Mhm.
The thing we've actually really been focusing on now, and it's really been helping us with, is reels. And even when using like even if you put up like a quote, which should be just an image, if you take that image and stretch it out to 3 seconds and make it a reel, you can get thousands of views that way because people don't realize the loop's still playing.
Mm.
That helps you then trend and get picked up in the reels that Instagram promotes and stuff like that. So we've been focusing heavily on reels now, and that's purely content based. We're not focusing on like some of the stuff we focused on in the past, like, okay, we're going to follow for follow, or we're going to, we're going to do, shout outs to celebrities and stuff like that. Like, sure, those things ostensibly look good, right? Like, because you get some
Mhm.
numbers. But here's the thing: it's like I said, your engagement tanks, and engagement is really, to me, what shows if you're doing a good job. So we've been doing a lot with reels, and we've been watching our view counts over there, and we've been getting in thousands there. So that's, to me, the biggest thing that we're looking at. And that's on Instagram. I'm not big on stories just because I feel like my life isn't that interesting. I post them, but it's kind of like my life is boring. Like, okay, took kids to store. Okay, went and got ice cream with children. Like, you know what I mean? Like, fed chickens. Like, my life is boring. But we do stories of like once in a while, or we're always promoting podcast episodes and stories and teasers of them, and those do well because then your guest usually will add that to their story, so you're getting promotion that way. Like you're not always going to get where a guest shares a link like they used to, but if you can get in their story, that's also a big deal as well. And that's going to bring people back, which are going to view your reels and stuff like that. So that's the biggest thing we're focusing on Instagram. On LinkedIn, we're focusing on long form written content.
Mhm.
Video did great a few years ago where you could literally put up anything and people would watch it, but the platform has changed a lot, and they've really been restricting video views, at least in the last 2 years. So I'm finding the thing that worked 2 years ago, they used to call it broetry, and it was because it was the bros writing poetry. I think Josh Fector was a guy that kind of like had coined that phrase, and they'd written an article
Uh-huh.
about him. And basically the idea was you get 3 lines on a post before people have to click that see more button. So you want to write something that's really going to grab their attention and get them to write the see more button. And then when you write the post, you're skipping lines every sentence because it's mobile friendly and people can read it easier. So
Mm.
that format was really, really good like 5 years ago. Then
Mhm.
video got popular and they started promoting video, and now that format is popular again. The thing you want to think about though is you don't want to have links in those posts. If you're going to use a link, it has to be in the comments, because anytime there's a link in the post, it drives down your views because they don't want you to leave the platform, right? So that's what we're doing on LinkedIn. Facebook, I don't know. We don't really try that hard. We just kind of we
We're
post what
just
we
there.
post on LinkedIn. We just post what we post on LinkedIn, and people engage with it. And it's kind of cool because it's grown over the years. And we've grown that by promoting ads at followers of other people when they're on the show. So like, we
Mm.
had Grant Cardone on, so let's promote this post at his followers. And that's actually worked really well for us because they see, oh, there's the person I like. They're talking to somebody I don't know. Let me find out I don't know guy. And we picked up a lot of followers that way. So that's kind of been our strategy. Um, Twitter, the reason we've grown is because that's the only social media platform I actually use. I'm usually talking to people on Twitter. So like, I had a conversation with Ryan Reynolds a few years ago that BuzzFeed picked up and wrote an article about it because I asked him about being on the podcast and we had a back and forth. And he goes, hold on, I got to ask my wife. And I didn't realize it was Blake Lively's birthday that day. So BuzzFeed picked it up. But like, I live on Twitter and that's the reason it's grown. And
Mm.
I don't know a better way to grow Twitter than living on it. So that's kind of what we've done.
And yes, I would agree with that with Twitter. By the way, I
Sorry,
got
I
to,
know that was like a mouthful, but like I like these are the things that we've done, and I'm kind of willing to share all of it.
yeah. By the way, I got a chance to see Ryan Reynolds. He came out to speak to a group of Goldman Sachs alumni last month. So
Oh wow.
yeah, it was
Is he
pretty
as
cool.
funny in person as he seems to be?
He is. He very much is. And he's smart. Oh my goodness. The stuff that he was talking about, because he has a marketing company. I don't know if a lot
Yeah.
of people know that, but he has a marketing company. And the stuff that he was talking about, both with the film industry, like Deadpool, and then, what he does in his marketing, I was like, that is so brilliant. I mean, he talked about how to promote Deadpool because it was, I think, rated R, so they already had a limited audience size, and it's I think they got like a third of the budget they would most of those action figure movies would get. They
Hmm.
had to focus on basically the character Deadpool and the things he would say versus the action like most action movies do.
Yeah.
I was like, that is so smart.
He's a really smart guy though too, because you even look at there was a back and forth for a number of years between him and oh gosh, why is his name suddenly escaping me? Because I absolutely love The Greatest Showman, Hugh Jackman.
Mm,
There was a big and do you know why they were doing that?
no.
Because it would promote Aviation Gin on Ryan's side, and it would promote Laughing Man Coffee on Hugh Jackman's side. And they had this big back and forth for years, and they played it off of Deadpool and Wolverine and did all this stuff. So like, they're really smart there. At the same time, I actually Mint Mobile is my cell phone provider because of a Ryan Reynolds commercial. And I will tell you, we've had it for 4 years. They use T-Mobile's towers, and I pay like $300 for the entire year. So thanks, Ryan Reynolds.
Absolutely. Okay. So, just talking about your company a little bit. So we talked about your
Yeah.
podcast and how you got
Mhm.
your followers. So your company, when did this come in?
So the first version of it was called Slate Media Productions, and that started really in early or late 2015. And that was us doing podcasts for people. And part of my wife has a degree in PR, and she's
Mhm.
worked in the industry for like many, many years. So one of the things she said is like, oh, we have to get in press releases. We have to get you out in the newspaper. Like we use local media like hardcore, which I think a lot of businesses should be, because as a small business, your superpower is promoting locally, where a lot of people don't. Writing,
Mhm.
doing things in your community, writing about it, putting in the press release, not waiting for other people to talk about you. Like, so that was one thing we were doing. So we were doing that for our clients, like writing about them in the local community and getting them in the paper. The other thing we were doing is getting them on other podcasts, because when you think about it as a podcast listener, right, there's like way too many steps to finding, locating, subscribing to a podcast and figuring out how to listen to it. So if you're going to promote to people that already know what they are. So
Mhm.
that's why we're like, okay, let's help people get on other podcasts. And we found out that that was going so well. We ended up starting a company called Get Featured Media with another business partner. And we did multiple six figures in our first 9 months in business. But I like the human touch and kind of keeping it a very personal thing. He wanted to turn it into an app. And so because of that, we didn't get along really well. And we ended up ending that business, and I kept all the employees and everything else. And that company became Command Your Brand. So
Mhm.
since 2017, we've been helping people tell a better story, show up in the right places, and really help them be on the right podcasts. And from the perspective of the right podcast, the right guest for the right podcast, because right, I'm a host. I don't want somebody, throwing the wrong person at my show. And at the same time, like the right show for the client as well, because if they're telling their story in the right place, it's not going to impact either. So that's really what we've been trying to do since 2017.
So telling your story. Hmm. So that's a place where I struggle.
Yeah.
I really do. I mean, I know what I do. I
What do
know
you
what I
find
do
is the
well.
biggest? What do you find is the biggest struggle about it? Because I've struggled with this for years, so I'm happy to talk about it.
So articulating what I do in a way that doesn't sound like this is actually an actual conversation that's going on in the business right now. This is what we do. It's technical. It's great. It's going
Hmm.
to pick up SEO, but it doesn't relate to anybody.
How so?
There's no human touch there. There's with the copy that we're in the process of trying to work with right now. So we're just struggling with, what's the story? Why are we here? We can say what we do all day long.
So
Okay.
here, so I took a program about 6 months ago, which really helped me with this. Guy's called David Breyer, and he has this brand intervention masterclass. So if you ever get a chance
Hmm.
to check him out, like his program is great. He does this like um 8 or 9 week program, and you go through his course and do a call with him every Saturday morning. Like that was helpful. So actually, like what changed for us is like we looked at it, we're like, all right, we book people on podcasts and we help them appear on podcasts. Great. Okay. So then you're talking about like, well, which podcasts are the right podcasts and what's the reach? And like, and like you end up getting all these things. So the thing that changed for us, right, is when you look at some of the most impactful things in history, December 7th, 1941, a day that will live in infamy.
Hmm.
One small leap for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Hmm.
And you look at all these things. I have a dream. What is happening? Someone is speaking directly with their unadulterated thoughts to the people that need to hear them. And that's what we do. We help the thoughts of a founder to get unadulterated to the exact people that need to hear them. I didn't talk about podcasts at all. And that's actually changed the game for us because that is what we do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And right now it's podcasts. We've done other media and things like that. But that's what happens is you get to the core of what you do and why you do it and how you're different.
And I feel like we're missing that a little bit. So talk about your process and how you walk people through that, just high
Sure.
level overview.
Yeah, sure. So,
And this
whoa,
is a little
sorry about that. I moved my mouse and it woke Siri up.
This is a little self-serving too. I was like, I just want to know.
Well, because here's the thing to take a look at, right? And sometimes it's harder and sometimes it's easier because you have to get clients to understand like the right show is important, but how are you going to show up is actually even more important. Because I think initially, because people just don't understand the podcast world, they're like, okay, well, is this show good? Is this one good? Like, what's the audience like? And it's like, okay, well, this is what they talk about, and this is who the host is, and this is what the host cares about, and this is how you should show up. So the first thing is really getting somebody to understand you need to show up as the single most valuable person they've ever had on their show, because the audience is great, but also at the same time, like this is my viewpoint, and I hope you've kind of gotten this in this conversation. Like, I'm here to make a friend. And I really genuinely like making friends, right? So like I want to educate people and really help them. And because of that, we have clients get speaking engagements. We have clients, get joint venture activities. So like it's this incredible way to appear in front of their audience, but also network with some really cool freaking people. Like that's been really great. So it's getting people to understand that first, and then teaching them how to, because one of the things we said before, you said to me before we got started here, and I really appreciate this, is you said, hey, I'll give you some time at the end to mention what you're doing. Like, you don't have to kind of like drop it here and there in the interview, because we try to get clients to stop doing that, because that's actually I've had interviews I haven't published because it's like, dude, I heard about your YouTube course. Can you stop now? Like, we'll give you a landing page, bro. Just calm down. So like,
I'm actually glad to hear you say that, because there have been only a handful, but a couple of podcasts I've recorded that I'm like, I can't publish this.
I've done, I'm trying to think now. Like, so we have two podcasts. We have the Command Your Brand show where we're closing in 100 episodes. And then my show, I think we're at like 1,010 or something like that. So I've done a lot of episodes. I only haven't published 5. Wow. There are 5 episodes I haven't published because it was like, do you remember the Sham Wow guy? Where you see the commercials and he was like telling you what it does, and he's like, and you can do this with it and do that with it. Like, they were infomercials. So it's like I could not get the person to stop infomercialing. So that's the major thing. And I actually play the Sham Wow for commercial for people in our onboarding to get them to not do that. Because like the thing is you have to be willing to teach, be willing to show everything. And our most successful clients are the ones that they don't worry that somebody else is going to hear this and go do it without them, because 97% of people won't. They'll hire you. So you want to show up and really educate and help somebody. And that's what we really try to get through to our clients. We also help them with a good call to action and things like that too, right? Like, coming up with a really cool and interesting link, not mywebsite.com/blank/blank/blank, because nobody can remember that. Like something interesting. My favorite one, by the way, do you know who Mike Michalowicz is?
I don't.
Okay. So he's this really cool author that I had on my show a number of years ago. And he like writes books and then builds a business around it and then gets somebody else to buy into the business and they build it together. It's really cool.
Oh.
But anyway, nobody can spell Michalowicz. That's a really hard name to spell. So his website is mikemotorbike.com. So that's one of the things we talk about like with clients is come up with a really cool idea for a website that's going to be quick and easy, and you can just go by the URL and make it a redirect. So these are the kind of things we're helping clients with, as well as like managing their schedule, making sure that all of that stuff's handled, your prep for every interview. So we're really trying to make sure that we respect the integrity of a podcast, because I don't want somebody coming in my house and be like, hey, cook me dinner. And as a host, that's how I feel. So we're trying to really kind of make it work both ways.
I love to hear that. So what haven't I asked you that I probably should have?
My favorite book.
Okay. What's your favorite book?
It's called So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport. And because I think the idea of following your passion versus finding your passion is the single worst thing you can ever do, whereas finding your passion is different. Following your passion, you're trying to catch it, you're trying to find it, it's out there somewhere. One day I'll get it, and one day I'll do what I want to do. But until then, I'm going to be broke and not figure it out. Finding your passion implies you try a bunch of things. Some of them work, some of them don't work. You mentioned all the businesses I failed at. I still learned something from each and every one of those things. But Cal talks about like finding something you're good at and continuing to work at it and work at it and work at it. And when you get to the area where it becomes effortless and you figure out what to do with it, you become passionate. But to become passionate before you do something is kind of putting the cart before the horse. So I would recommend your audience check out that book. It's called So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport.
Okay. And I'll make sure that that is in the show notes. Jeremy, how can people find you after the interview?
So the way they can find me is I put together a really great resource for them called The 7 Reasons You're Not Getting Featured in Your Favorite Podcasts. We've had a lot of failures. We've had a lot of successes, and I don't want people to have those same things. So I try to make it easy and quick for you. So it kind of cut the learning curve. So if you go to crushitonpodcast.com, and if you do it with an S or without an S, you will still get there. So crushitonpodcast.com, you can go grab that.
Perfect. We'll also make sure that's in the show notes. You know what? I have had the best conversation with you today.
Same here.
It's been fun. It's been entertaining, and I know that our guests will, our audience will take something away from it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.